I think, quite honestly, if I had done what some of my peers had done, that I could have climbed faster and gotten further in my career, but I just never thought that it was worth it. I wanted to be able to lay my head down at night and know that I was good at what I did and I didn't have to cut any corners. And I was, right? Because I was always fascinated by people. Like, they would walk past and I would wonder, see their facial expressions, and I'd wonder what they were going through, what their life experience was. So I can honestly say that I was wired from the very beginning of having a deep interest in understanding people and understanding their journeys. Everything is not personal. And oftentimes some of the decisions that are made have absolutely nothing to do with you. Absolutely nothing. And it's a little humbling, actually, when you think about it, that may have nothing to do with you. It may be that they feel like, I never thought about, like, when I was going up for regional window manager opportunities.
The details of my life are quite inconsequential. I told you it's a terrible impression, but I think some of the common ground, and that's a big theme for our show in general, is how do we establish common ground amongst all of everybody out there that's coming from all sorts of different places. You and I have very similar backgrounds in terms of where we came from. We're both immigrants. I was actually born in India and spent my first 7 years there. I look through my career across a number of different roles, and I think I've been really lucky to be surrounded by people who eventually are of like mind. My default is to speak in big terms, and a growth area for me is to take that vision part and put it into like the stepwise components. Like, I'm not comfortable operating there, but I've gotten a lot better there. But if you're looking at a default driver, I always talk with people that I hire about what is it that you want and what is it that you can attack with a single-minded purpose and unrelenting fury.
Fortunately, my parents ended up getting divorced when I was 4 years old. Even then, my father would check in and ensure that I was learning my ABCs. The emphasis was always on making sure I learned something from day to day. He would ask me, I remember being asked questions about how to spell certain words at 4 years old. And that emphasis was something that really stuck with me. My mother worked as a laboratory technician at the Bronx Lebanon Hospital. So going from Brooklyn to Bronx, we're talking about a nearly 3-hour commute every morning, 5 or 6 a.m., and take a dollar cab to a bus. It all comes with winning the day. First, you learn the role, master the role to the extent that you can. And you have to understand the organizational interactions that come with the role. Instead of being inwardly focused, you have to be outwardly focused. And you have to understand what the consequences are of things that you're turning in. You have to understand your organizational interactions. You have to understand how feasible certain things are. And you just have to have a regular eye for process.
Well, I want to give the backstory first. So the backstory is that several years ago, there was a leader who I had been working with. He'd recently come to the organization, and he said something along the lines of, leaders are readers. And the book that he threw out was Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. So, of course, he was someone that made a valid point about leaders being readers. And I'm like, okay, I'll definitely check out the book. I checked out the book, and I thought it was amazing. And I continued down my path about reading everything that is Malcolm Gladwell.
But if you have that process and philosophy set up and you're still being pushed to sell in an inauthentic way, you can never capture the results that you're really designed to capture. And the reason why I set the stage with all of that stuff is that the book that I'm reviewing is called Sell Without Selling Out by Andy Paul. And this book is at a level where I think it should be as foundational as Spin, as Challenger, but from an execution and authenticity perspective. So Spin and Challenger will give you the foundational process stuff. This will actually talk about what your soul as a seller should be. And here's what I mean. Rather than approaching the sales conversation.
As far as my background goes, close to 20 years or around 20 years. I never thought I'd ever get to the point in my life where I'd say I did 20 years of anything, but it has happened. But I've been in HR in some permutation of the healthcare space. I was in generic pharma, big pharma, medical devices, managed healthcare. Before that, I was in radio, but eventually wanted to move out of my parents' basement because there's only so long you could stare at a Jim Morrison blacklight for the rest of your life. So went on and found a career where I could monetize a little bit more. Certification-wise, organizational development coach, and a certified master facilitator.
I want to also just piggyback off of something Adam had mentioned. Retention and turnover costs could be a whole nother episode, right? Gallup has done studies where most companies have about 26% turnover rate and can cost anywhere between 1/2 to 2/3 salary to replace that person. So a 100-person organization can be anywhere between 700, 1,000 to 2.3 million in turnover costs. So hopefully some of these points that we're talking about here can help with some retention. COVID impacted us surprisingly in a negative way, and a lot of our healthcare clients as well.
But everyone knows who I am, what I've got going on, and how I balance my life, because I do it very intentionally, so I speak to it very intentionally. And I think that it gives my team the permission to do that themselves, and it creates this connection, which ultimately leads to trust. This team that I have with me right now is a dynamic that I've never experienced before with the team. The amount of trust that we have, the amount of, I've got your back, you got this thing going on, let me pick some stuff up for you, and we'll power through it together.
How can I make this better? I might be the reason why things aren't better. So I have to also evaluate myself as well. There might be some change I need to make in order to move to the next level. And it takes you out of that equation to be personally offended, because your whole purpose is to make the system or organization in which you're working improve their efficiency to create better value for all constituents, everybody that's involved.
If you care about making an impact, and that's how I'm wired, then why wouldn't you want to be in sales? There's no other place where you can make a bigger impact than helping another organization drive their revenue or control their costs, which could be the thing that separates them from being defunct to being the next unicorn.
So in terms of the overarching goal and vision, where we want to go, we want to democratize and revolutionize education as we know it. Education at the moment is super expensive. A lot of people really go for the experience, but it doesn't really get you into a role. It's not role specific unless you're doing a specific STEM, so unless you're going to develop, unless you're going to a common law or a doctor or a dentist. A lot of the degrees don't prepare you for a world of work, and they don't actually get you into a position. People will go to university, they'll come out and they won't know what to do. They'll still be working in Walmart because they have no options. So we want to change education, make it cheaper, make it accessible for everyone. And actually,
so fortunately, I landed in a new company where our mission is actually aligned with changing how the perception of fintech in general or the global markets look, right? Like making a conscious effort where we have above 80% of our board being females and people of color. So things like that, again, acknowledging that it's at the point in my career where I had the option to make a change that aligned with my mission.
That I grew up in a neighborhood that was very international, very cosmopolitan. We were all immigrants, and from different parts of the world, I might add. But the beauty was English was our common denominator. So all the friends that I had from Yugoslavia, the Arab nations, and other parts of the world, we had to speak that sort of broken English to communicate. So it was an immersion that happened on purpose at home, at school, and even with the friends that I had.